Go. Okay, doctor. I
Hey,
actually
Rabbi, how are you?
good. So my name is Rabbi Avrohom Brashevitzky, Dr. David Lazarson. It feels funny to call you doctor. To me, you're just that regular guy down the street. I don't even know why they call you doctor, but for the purpose of this interview, or what I really want to call friendly conversation, I'm going to call you Dr. Laz, or Laz in short.
I
Okay?
just have to tell you, Rabbi, I,
Yeah.
I do have my PhD in research and evaluation in education and psychology.
So
That
that's
that's the doctorate.
thus the doctorate. No, but the reason why I said that, and I don't even know where to begin, and I have to be honest, and I hope the listener will forgive me. But when I said this is not an interview, this is going to be a friendly conversation. And I'll tell you why. Because to me, you're a friend, you're a legend, you're almost like a superstar. And I'm not trying to flatter you.
Can I
And
can I
just
quote you? Rabbi?
yeah, yeah, just an amazing individual. And I remember you going way back. I know your age is a little telling, perhaps, even though you're so young. Um, thank God you behave younger than I feel. But you have white hair. I have black hair, but I still remember you. I remember you growing up in Brooklyn. I didn't grow up much, but they tried at least. They made an attempt at it, at having me grow up. But I remember you growing up as I was growing up in Brooklyn, and specifically in the Crown Heights area. And I remember you, and I remember some of the things that come to mind as I'm thinking about you. Every time I think about you, some wonderful things, and I have to say that they're like almost like you're the guy that, in my mind, always crossed the train tracks, if I may. Always was the guy to cross the train tracks, and not just to cross it, to explore because you're curious, but you crossed it actually to have those steel rails of the train tracks, so to speak, melt away and bring the people together. You know what I mean? Abolish the train tracks. That's the way I saw you always. You're that guy. And specifically, more recently, something that I was so proud of. I have to say I'm proud of. You're not my child, you're not my father, but when you won that award, that Rosa Parks award, and I know you're not the type of guy to seek it out. You're not the type of guy to solicit it. You know what I mean? So it came to you. It came to your doorstep. That's so telling to me. That's like, wow, this is the world, the people recognizing, who Dr. Laz is, what Dr. Laz has done, what you attempt to do, and what you continue to do. And hopefully, not only what you're doing, but as a result of your investment of time, effort, and energy all these years, that other people will pick it up and continue with this amazing work that you're doing. So I'm going to start with asking you first, if I may, Doctor. I said I'll call you Laz, and here I called you Doctor. I'm going to ask you some questions that come to mind in no particular order.
Sure.
First, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what's your background. Because to me, you wear many hats. You wear many hats. I know you're a father, I know you're a grandfather, I know you've gone through your own personal aches and pains in life, not to minimize it in any way. I want to call outright tragedies. You've been there for people when they were going through their aches and pains. You've been there for communities, not only your own. You're not the type of guy to just look out for, quote unquote, your own. You've been there for so many. And like I said you're a legend. And the great thing I like about you is you're not the typical cookie cutter Orthodox, and in this case Chassidic rabbi. If anything, you're anything but that. You're not the cookie cutter guy. So that's why I want to know a little more about you, so the listener can get an appreciation. Where do you come from? Who are you?
I just landed from outer space, and it's just been an amazing adventure. So the growing up part, listen, I'm still working on. I think that's
And that was my line.
my dad used to say, he was fond of saying, you should take life seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And I think it's just it's got a gem of wisdom in there. And so I grew up in Buffalo. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. Thus, oh yeah, that's
Bills,
what I'm talking about.
right?
One of these years, right? How
One
long must I wait?
one of these years I'll make you proud.
I have learned like patience to wait for Mashiach from the Buffalo Bills. Okay. because every year that people would say, "Don't worry, this year, it's happening this year, it's coming this year, it's going," So it's a good lesson in practical patience. But grew up in I would say a very had a very, thank God, a very happy childhood, a very functional family. Everybody's family's got their own idiosyncrasies and mishigas, but yeah, I was very blessed to have have great parents. My mom, God bless her, she just celebrated her 96th birthday.
Wow.
And she's more with it than me, that's for sure. Let's not say it much, but she does like the New York Times crossword puzzle, so I'm very good at it if I cheat. But so I think that was a big part of it, and had just a mock Abraham and Sarah's tent, and that they were on some list with the city of Buffalo, that when foreign exchange students and guests would come into the city from other countries, somehow they ended up at our house and they would have dinner. Sometimes they'd sleep over. We just recently saw a young lady named Teddy, which she's now she's already 75, Kanai, but she was our foreign exchange student in her senior year in high school, and she came from Argentina. So it was just this kind of family of, just as a kid, seeing people from all walks of life, all different religions, all different colors, sizes, shapes, you name it, and just realizing how every person is valuable and unique, and really, I think most people on the planet really have this sort of goodness and want to be good and want to do good. And I feel like once I got involved with Chabad, and to me the Rebbe was such a visionary. His scope of vision as he perceives people and perceived the world was just astounding. Every time I thought I was the cool one, I was the cool Jew, he totally outcooled me every time. And here's this Chassidic rabbi from Brooklyn. He came from Russia. Came from Europe. I figure if anybody could teach him a lesson, I'll teach him a lesson. Well, you know how that went, right? So there is an individual who just saw everyone as being as godly, in a way, of having this sort of godly spark inside, and relating to that and trying to emphasize that and bring that out, I think, in each person that he had contact with. So the Rebbe really thought globally, thought universally, but really acted very locally. Anyhow, that, I know I'm jumping ahead, but that I think that was, when I went through my graduating high school and then through sort of my hippie days in college, where I fought against everything and rebelled against everything, and rebelled against being Jewish, and rebelled against the quote unquote establishment, and grew my hair real long. And, my roommate was a marijuana dealer. Don't ask.
Laz, can I ask you a question? At least
Sure.
those days, did you have fun? Did you enjoy it?
It was interesting that you asked that, because yes, we did. But on the other hand, it was really interesting because whenever we would do quote unquote drugs, whatever it wasn't for just to laugh and have a good time. We thought we were really elevating our consciousness, becoming deeper, more spiritual, and it took me a while to realize that drugs is a dead end street, and it'll take you only so far, and very often it leads to a dead end in more ways than one, unfortunately. So then all of a sudden, to my last semester, I took a course called Jewish Mysticism. I was looking through the course catalog, and I was when I had long hair down to the middle of my back, long curly hair. I see a course called Jewish Mysticism, 3 hours credit. Okay, that a piece of cake, no problem. Well, little did I realize that course would be my most life-changing event. It was taught by a Chabad rabbi, Rabbi Garari, Nassim Garari, and I fought him tooth and nail the entire semester. As much as I fought, I felt like I just never landed a punch. He was like too clever, too smart, too funny. He was absolutely brilliant and also very kind of funny, kind of fun personality, but very deep personality, deep person. And he got me to the point where I realized that what I knew about Judaism wasn't the real McCoy stuff. And so he challenged me, and then kind of just sort of flying through this, went in for a Pagisha, like an encounter weekend with Chabad, and met the Rabbi, went back again, and then at least I at that point I realized that there was a lot more to this being Jewish and this Yiddishkeit business than I had thought. I really thought to be spiritual and to reach a sort of elevated state of consciousness, organized religions was not the way to go. Rabbi Garari's class, and then also meeting the Rebbe, I realized there was something very amazing that was right in my own backyard. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I really felt like, well, I've been just digging in everybody else's backyard but my own. So that's sort of kind of it in a nutshell in terms of my background. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Rabbi. I don't hear you. Still don't hear you. Technical difficulties.
You hear me now?
Yeah, okay. Got you now.
Take it without the fancy mic. So what I'm garnishing now from what you said, just I have a few questions. Number one, it seems to me that although you grow up in a very loving home, very open-minded home, but as far as Judaism is concerned, can we classify it, or would you say it's fair to say that it's like it was more of a secular Jewish home? We're just
I would say culturally, and we belong to a conservative synagogue, so we went to shul more than that some people go 3 times a year. So we definitely went more than that, and but not too much more. But again, it was also the kind of thing where you walk into the synagogue, you take a beanie from the basket, you put it on before you leave, drop it back into the basket. I mean, if they would have had these kind, they would have had a lot more members.
It would have ended up in your pocket, but
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So you just answered that one question. Another question I have is, and it's obvious, I mean, I wouldn't call it the elephants in the room, but the instruments in the room. And I know that about you, but the listener, the viewer, you see all the musical instruments. I see many guitars leaning against the wall. I see a tambourine, percussion. Yeah, right. Am I right?
Yeah.
So you got a lot of things going there. You got the electrical one, the acoustics. I see it. So tell us a little bit about that, because obviously you just gave us a synopsis of your youth and kind of where you reached Chabad and where you joined this and where you drank that Kool-Aid. But until then, where you've been. I know you've played. You're a great performer. And I love about you is you're that performer that's up there on stage. At least my experience is that you're not larger than life. I feel like, hey, that's the guy I know up there that's playing. He's just my friend playing. It's not this big superstar. You don't give off this false aura of being somebody you're not. But you play, you're talented. You know how to play music. I don't know how to play anything. There's one song I know how to play, Happy Birthday on a piano, because someone told me the few notes, you know what I'm saying? And even that I forgot. So to me, anybody who knows how to play music already tells me that they have a deep soul and they have a way of expressing their soul. Where have you been? Tell us a little bit about that, if I may. In the music, in the hippie world, putting that together. I tell you, the word that jumps out in my mind is Woodstock. Were you there? Did you have fun? Did you actually perform? Tell us a little bit, if I can, walk us through history.
Right. Well, when you mentioned Woodstock, I actually I call this it was the sort of modern these 20th century Jewish therapy was send the kids to Israel, and so my parents did send me to Israel in '69, and then also no and yeah, and then I went back in '71 on my own. And just to give you a framework, on my backpack, I had a bumper sticker that I had glued onto my backpack. It said, "America, love it or leave it," and I was leaving. So I had my backpack on, and off I went. But yeah, music is it's the language of the soul. It's the great unifier, and it's interesting because now I for the last several years, more than almost I don't know, I guess 14 years, I've been doing music therapy in the Broward Public Schools, and it's a center for individuals with profound special needs. And I see just the magic of music, the power of music. We have a special needs performing group and called the Sensations, and some of them use American Sign Language. Let's say I'll play the music and sing, and they'll do the sign language to it. And some of them will use adaptive switches from their wheelchairs. You hit a head switch or a knee switch, a puffer switch, and it activates a percussion instrument, a drum or a tambourine, that kind of thing. So
I want to try it in for a moment. That in particular that you just mentioned about the special needs children, special needs, youth, and you playing with them, bringing out the depth of their soul, I can very much relate to it. And perhaps it's something I need to explore personally. My second to youngest child was born with Down syndrome and later diagnosed with autism. I think actually severe autism. He just turned 9 years old. He doesn't yet talk, maybe one barely audible or two barely audible words. So yeah, I can relate very much. And I look at it as, wow, you're a miracle worker too, on top of the whole repertoire that I gave you before. You're a miracle worker. If you can bring out them, their souls and their inner expression, and you have a way to do it through the music, it's not just you working miracles alone. It's through the music, which I think music in itself, like we said, is the language of the soul. It is miraculous to me. Music is miraculous. I mean, I know when I listen to music, I'm in a bad mood and I'm suddenly listening to good upbeat tune, and suddenly I can't help myself. I'm getting pulled out of it. You know what I mean? I'm getting pulled out of it. So I look at you and I say, wow, right, you're the miracle worker holding that staff. I guess that staff of miracles, which is the music in this case. So that's an amazing thing. But take us back for a moment, if I may. Take us back to your youth. When you were performing, you were out there, and the music scene then, I think, was synonymous with, I guess, most part, being, rock and roll, with the hippies, with
right.
You said before, marijuana, just kind of rebelling against society, against the establishment. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, my parents, again, I'll attribute this to my parents. I really think that most of my things that I really love doing, in terms of whether it's music, nature, the great outdoors, camping, those kinds of things, my parents really gave me they opened those doors for me because they signed me up in a Boy Scout troop when I was 9 years old. I went to camp. We're still doing. My wife and I still go to camp every summer. We've been doing it over 4 decades. Okay, it's crazy, and when I think about it. So I'm a co-director of a ropes course. So I'm hanging out up in the trees all day long. You can't beat it, Rabbi. It's nothing like it. That's my office.
So I have to tell you, I have to divulge a little secret.
Yeah.
A couple hours ago, I took my wife. We went somewhere to just pick up a few things from the store, and I told her, "Listen, at 9 o'clock, I got to be back because I'm going to be talking with Dr. Laz." And then we tried to estimate, and it's not really my business, but he tried to estimate about how old you have to be, because she goes, "Wait, his daughter was in my class." Okay, well, the oldest, right, is my class. If I'm turning 50, she's got to be about that age, 49, 50. I mean, he didn't have a child when he was 10, so he's got to be somewhere up there. And I go, I want to tell you something, Zeldy. Zeldy's my wife's name. I go, whatever age he is, he's younger than me. Okay. He's definitely got 20 years or 25 years on me. Okay. I would never know. So I say that, no, I can see you hanging from ropes, whatever. I couldn't hang from ropes 25 years ago. I couldn't hang from ropes. I'm done. You know what I mean? You're there, you're climbing, you're there, you're all, and kudos to you. I know you keep it up and you're always moving, you're always there. But let's go back to the music. So you're saying, so you that your parents gave you all that, outdoormanship and all that, you're always involved in that activity. But did they push you in the area of music?
Yeah, I started off on piano because I think it was sort of like the thing for parents to do for their kids back then. And of course, I have an older sister who's 2 years older than me, who is like absolutely brilliant in everything. So like she's already learning Mozart, and I'm going, I'm playing chopsticks. Right? So, and every class in high school that I followed, 2 years later, the teachers would say to me, "Oh, we had your older sister Sharon. Are you sure you're a Lazarson? Like something don't jive here."
You were shaming the family's name, the reputation.
Well, let's just say I was Levitic. Okay.
Levitic means lively. Right.
Yeah. And every so often I had a good teacher that inspired me, but that's a whole other, conversation. So I begged my parents for drum lessons. And for my bar mitzvah, my piano teacher quit on me, and my older sister as well, because she also wasn't too thrilled about just practicing scales. It wasn't the Suzuki method. It wasn't like, now when I teach music, and so I'll ask students, okay, what kind of music do you like? What song would you like to play? You start right away with a song, because all of a sudden, after a week or two, they're getting the basic chords to a song, and suddenly they know they're making music instead of those days. Piano was just like these boring scales that just drive you loony toony. And so my sister had good handwriting, so my parents would be out for dinner, and we would write a note to our piano teacher, whose name was Mrs. Hora, interestingly enough. And dear Mrs. Hora, we're sorry we're not here. We'll see you next week. And we would tape it on the door. We'd hear her knocking, and then it'd be like, oh, phew, she left. So of course we got caught after like 6 weeks of my parents paying and realizing that they paid for nothing. So there went our allowance for the next 2 months. But my dad said to me, okay, I'm going to let you take drums, but I'm not going to buy you a drum set. Every month you stay with your lessons, I'll buy you another piece. It might take you a whole year to earn a drum set. It was actually very brilliant. And so that was my ticket to ride, because now I was in high school. I had drumsticks. I had a drum pad. I was, like my ADHD. I needed to do something, and so my nickname was Ringo from the Beatles. And I started playing in a band in high school, which was, that's godless, right? Because if I wasn't like, a jock, like to be on the football team. Actually, it was on the swim team, but a skinny Jewish kid like me, swim team. So, which was, a good discipline actually. But so I drums was really like an opening for me, and so I feel like when parents always say to me, "What can I do for my kids?" I always say to them, "You got to keep them busy and positive things." That's that is the answer, whatever that takes. It might mean you're playing chauffeur every day of the week, except Shabbos, but you're going to drive them to soccer lessons, you're going to karate lessons, you're going to drive them to drum lessons, drive them to whatever. But you got to do it. You just got to do it. And I'm saying for kids who need that little extra thing, and but I feel like music in particular is so valuable. My academic grades started going up. Why? I mean, they say music was very connected to mathematics, and I just became I got into school more, and suddenly I had like a good ticket in. People like they wanted to know me. Just because I played drums in a band. So we used to play at the JCC, and we weren't a great band, but we were making music and people were, moving to it. But I saw back then like that music is such a catalyst, and it's for self-growth and for your self-esteem, but also like how it brings joy to other people. And I see it now, particularly with the special needs population. We touched upon it a little bit, and again, this is a whole other conversation, and we could spend several hours on it. But it is a gold mine, and it has to be tapped into. And I've done trial and error with some kids. It's a particular song that suddenly brings a smile to their face that they connect to. I had this one girl in a wheelchair who was totally nonverbal and never smiled. And there's this one song, which Divine Providence, I heard it on the radio yesterday, and it goes bum 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 bum. Let's go. Let's go. So I had insisted that I would play that on the keyboard, and I would have the tambourine. I would go right up to this girl. Her name was Andrea, and I would just go tap out the beat, and I would just whisper in her ear, "Let's go." And this big smile comes on her face. And then I would hold the tambourine like this. It's called hand over hand, and hold it so she could take the tambourine to the beat. And we took pictures of her smiling. The parents blew up this huge picture, put it in their living room. But yeah, it's I'm just the music works magic. And so once I got involved in Yiddishkeit, and then with the Rebbe's bracha, I came back to get my master's degree in special ed. Got a job teaching in the public school system.
This is in New York, correct?
In Buffalo, New York. Buffalo. I was in yeshiva in Morristown, and again, these are long stories, for bragging stories. But it was very interesting that my parents said, "Look, you have to advance, in what you're doing. So you either learn full time, get smicha, become an ordained rabbi, or in the yeshiva in Morristown, or go back and get your master's degree." So I said, "Okay, you know what? Look, let me write into the Rebbe about it." Well, my dad was not too pleased, and he said, "Let me ask you a question. You wake up in the morning, you write into the Rebbe whether it's okay to brush your teeth." So I said, "Dad, like it's not the same thing. This is like a life decision here, and I'm not even saying I'm going to listen to him, but I just get his advice, So my father was like, he's like, hey, a hopeless case. He joined the cult. He can't do anything on his own. So and then
earlier he drank the Kool-Aid.
Right.
Right.
The electric Kool-Aid. Right?
Yeah.
So, and then my dad said, "What do you think? The Rebbe's going to tell you to go back to university? You're in his, yeshiva. He's going to tell you to stay here." Right. Right. You will be further brainwashed. And I think he said even like, my mom's English name is Tilly. He says, "Okay, Tilly, he's your son. You speak to him." And so it was decided I would write to the Rebbe. My wife says, you can't just tell the Rebbe those two options. Tell the Rebbe you get a full-time job. You work at Home Depot or the supermarket somewhere. You make an honest buck. So I wrote in those three possibilities. And when I was in Crown Heights just a couple of days later, I believe it was either Rabbi Klein or Rabbi Groner calls me into the office in 770, and he showed me the letter. Said, "You got a response from the Rebbe." The thing that said get a full-time job was crossed out, had a line through it. The thing that said learn for smicha was left blank. The thing that said go back get your master's degree was circled, and the Rebbe wrote Asker Latzion Bracha Batzlacha. I'll mention you my
just translate that, which means what? The Rebbe gave you his blessings.
Right. I'll mention you for a blessing at my father-in-law's holy gravesite, and I will and for blessing and success. And so I remember I called up my folks in Buffalo. I said I heard from the Rebbe, and my father was like, yeah, okay, yeah. I said, "Well, don't you want to hear what the Rebbe said?" Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. He said, "Well, the Rebbe said I should go back to college and get my master's degree." And so you hear his hand smacks the table, and he says, "You better listen to the Rebbe." We became like instant Rebbe supporters. You better listen to Rebbe. I'm not one to let this go so easily. So I said, Dad, that's what told me I got to think on my own here. This is not a cult, right? And so he said to me, if you don't listen to the Rabbi, I'm personally going to the Rabbi and saying, these are the kind of Chassidim you have. They just what the heck they want to do. They don't listen to you. So of course I listened. Went back and got my master's degree, and then the Rebbe gave me a bracha also to get my doctorate. I thought I was going to be in university for forever and ever.
Wow. So you know what? Let's just jump ahead, because I can
Sure.
just say for the era that I remember you, and this is growing up in Crown Heights, and most specifically, and I don't know exactly when you arrived on the scene in Crown Heights, but I want to say it's somewhere in the late 80s or middle 80s. No, in the 80s. But I remember you especially from the 90s, more specifically the early 90s, when there was a lot of controversy going on, a lot of provocation, a lot of issues. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie to you. Growing up as a kid, we have many Caribbeans living in the area, and on the same street, we had Jewish kids playing on the street, and you had the African American kids going through. And yes, we felt intimidated sometimes. I can't say we never had little shouting matches or whatever it is, and usually it was lopsided. We were afraid. We didn't, you know what I mean? But on the other hand, for the most part, we lived side by side in peace. It was like, they lived in their world, we lived in our world, we minded our business, they minded their business, and as long as you didn't venture off your block or we didn't belong, you felt more or less safe. I personally, maybe you remember the street, I lived on Sterling Street between Brooklyn and New York. So we didn't cross New York Avenue. It's just, you didn't cross it. You didn't go towards Nostrand. There's just, there was a high school there. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what the place looks like for the most part. Once or twice, maybe I ventured out there for a specific reason. But for the most part, everyone minded their own business. And then came, and, in the early 90s came the terrible riot. And there was, I think it was just that pressure cooker just kind of exploded. And sadly, I think mostly, if I'm, correct me if I'm making a mistake here, it was more people from outside of the community that came in, the African Americans, and had an opportunity to, vent their rage or whatever it is, but they didn't really belong there. It wasn't their fight, if there was a fight to have. And at the end of the day, I remember then, and this is something I want to focus in and zoom in on. You were that guy. And I think you still are that guy that always has that good, healthy chutzpah, that healthy audacity to go even a little bit against the grain. In other words, you're not going to stay still because this is what everybody else is doing. If you see a purpose and you see a need that you think you can fill and you're passionate about, you're going to go out there, even though the rest of the Chassidic guys who wear a black, coat on Shabbos, on the Sabbath, and, live a certain lifestyle and so on. They didn't venture out. Maybe they don't necessarily, we didn't necessarily carry any animosity towards the outside community, but it was just like, you stay there, we stay here, we'll just, live our lives, you live your lives. And you said, no, there's a way to get this to heal and to bring them together. And you kind of went things which certainly for us growing up in that community was totally outside of the box. Absolutely outside of the box. Okay. And I have to confess, I'm sure back then, if I was thinking about you, I think, who's this crazy guy? You know what I mean? Like, not because you're doing anything wrong, but you know how it is. Society typically, when you're doing something which people are just not accustomed to, so you're the weirdo. You might be doing the absolute right thing, but you're the weirdo because you're different. And that's maybe perhaps if I can go back 30 something years from now, backwards, that's maybe what I would think. And I want to know about that because I know you've had a lot of, inroads and contacts with the African American community. And I understand that till today you have some very good friends, personal friends, who perhaps they don't eat gefilte fish on Shabbos, okay? And they don't pray like you pray, and they don't necessarily think exactly you think, but you're good friends and you've made real solid lifelong, friendships and almost like family. And I know those pictures I've seen, and forgive me, doctor, I don't recall all the different projects you've done. You've sent me some of the clips. I have some of your books, skull caps and switchblades. And, that was very intriguing to me. I always followed that. But to tell you the truth, I always looked at it as like, okay, that's something he does. I don't know that I can do that. So I want you to talk about that. I'm sorry for giving this long monologue, but I want you to, if you can fill us in on that, and then come to, if I can, and I'll give you the mic, to earning this award, this prestigious award, this Rosa Parks award, which is, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, very, very telling, because I know you and I know your character. You're a very humble man. You're not one who would solicit such an award and apply for it, put your name on the list and get all your friends to vote you in. That's not the guy I know in Dr. Laz. And yet you are.
I had to pay him, Rabbi.
Yeah. You know what? I know that's not true. Because the work you do, you don't have the money to pay him. You've always been that guy that, is there serving the community. You have a master's, you have a PhD, but you're not making the big mega bucks because you're always there. I call it in the front lines, in the trenches. And that's what I remember you in the trenches, working in the inner city, especially in New York, tough places. If you could tell us about all that, just give us like a little picture of your life, working with people outside of your own community and bridge, building bridges and not only building bridges, but more importantly, maintaining them. There's one thing to build a bridge, there's another thing to maintain it. Go ahead. Right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's well said. That's a great analogy. It's tough to build it, but you got to maintain it. Otherwise it falls apart. And then you're back to where you started or maybe even worse.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I think that, that it was interesting because when I went back to get my master's degree and I was looking like this. Okay, it was, darker, with so much whiteness over here, but I was obviously Jewish. And there were a lot of lessons that I had to learn personally in terms of being proud about it, not trying to like hide it, and which I wrote about in my book Skullcaps and Switchblades, because they were just these wild, crazy stories. After I got my master's degree, so I thought in my head that, okay, now I can work I was probably the first guy maybe on the planet to be quote unquote Orthodox, Chassidic, observant, whatever, beard, yarmulke, tzitzis, and have an advanced degree in special education. So perfect. All these Jewish schools were just beginning to think about, making a program. So word got out there very quickly. I had a job offer for a yeshiva in LA to start a special needs program, for one in New York and for one in Miami. And I wrote into the Rabbi, don't hear a word. And I'm like, oh, what did I go back to get my my master's degree then? I get a job offer to teach in the Buffalo Public Schools. The Rabbi says, take the job. I'm like, really? How about you take the job and I'll sit in an office in Brooklyn? I mean, come on. And the school was in a tough part of town. And the name of the school is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community School. An inner city, tough inner city school. They had barbed wire in the teacher's parking lot on the fence. I never saw that except in World War II movies.
This is in the 70s.
This is my school, right? It's
in the 70s.
Right, late 70s, yeah. Yeah, I got my master's degree in 77. And so it was an eye-opening experience. I mean, it's just, I learned like the expression, which I love, this expression straight from Torah, where it says, I learned a lot from my teachers. I learned more from my colleagues. I learned the most from my students, more than even my teachers, which is mind-boggling. And I really did. I learned these deep, profound lessons. They taught me not to be ashamed of, my heritage. My supervisor was a Black woman. She taught me that lesson. Again, these are like, we could spend a whole night on just these experiences. But once I got that, those years under my belt in Buffalo, I'm a product of the public school system my whole life. I didn't go to yeshiva till I was 22 and a half. I graduated from University of Buffalo and then went to yeshiva in Morristown. So I know about the public school system. I went there my whole life. But it's one thing to go into a public school system looking like you belong there. That's another thing, to go into a public school system look like you just came from like a different, like the Twilight Zone. You just came from like Jupiter or something, looking like this. So, and I just had a lot of funny, crazy, wild, touching, amazing story every day. I just started keeping a journal where I would jot down. I didn't want to forget anything. And then I don't know, after like a year or two, I decided I got to write this up. I remember when the book finally came out, I gave it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to me, "Zolzana gute haschala, bracha v'atzlacha." It should be a good beginning, and blessing and success.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was really an opportunity again to see these tough inner city kids as, not to be threatened, not to be intimidated, but to see that, these are human beings of value, and they have great potential, and they need some extra TLC. They need some tough love sometimes, but they need us to be involved in their lives, not to like disenfranchise them, push them away. And they just supported me like crazy. They would, like, if a student teacher would come in, or somebody from the university, they'd go over to my desk drawer, they'd find a spare beat yarmulke, they'd put it on their head, they'd take out my siddur, and they'd start chuckling, and they would say, "You're coming to visit Mr. Laz's class, you have to know how to read this." They just totally pretended that they could read Hebrew. They would give me a bike escort on the way home, and then they would say to me, "Okay, you're in white man land now, you're good now." And they would turn around and ride back. Just these like wild, crazy stories.
You know what comes to mind now? If I can pause for a second, and please don't lose your train of thought. I'm just curious, because I'm thinking now, 77, 70, 80, we're talking now 40 years ago, over 40 years ago. Have you ever had, someone just come over to you or reach out to you and say, "Doctor, you may not remember me from 35, 40 years ago. You made a difference in my life, and look where I am today"?
I'm
sure you have, but have you ever had the benefit of finding that out?
Yeah, no, thank you. Those incidences are what really have made it, so worthwhile. You never know what you say, what you're going to do, how it's going to touch somebody's life. And yeah, I mean, I was I'd been out of the Buffalo public school system, and was living in Crown Heights. I was running the special ed program at Manhattan Day School, Yeshiva Torah, or a modern Orthodox school. And I was walking down Flatbush. I was near kind of like the movie theater on Flatbush Avenue, to give you an idea of what we're talking about. And I see this husky African American walking towards me. I'm walking on this side, and in 1 second, he comes over, he grabs me, lifts me up in the air. My arms were pinned against my body. I couldn't even fight back if I wanted to. And I thought, I don't know what this guy's going to do. He's going to throw me on the ground. Like, what the hell's going on? And he said to me, "Mr. Lance, how are you?" And this was a kid, I have to tell you, just so you can appreciate who this guy was. And maybe second or third week of when I began my teaching career, there's a student named Phil, and he came up to me and he said to me, at this Dr. Martin Luther King school, he said to me, "Hey, Mr. Laz, guess what I brought to school today?" So I said, "I don't know, Phil, what'd you bring in?" And he says, "I brought my piece." I said, "That's not your piece of cake, your piece of paper."
You know what he's talking about.
I had no idea what he was talking about.
You didn't speak ghetto talk, no hood talk.
I was such a greenhorn.
Yeah.
And I remember he said to me, "You don't know what a piece is?" And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, like a piece of cake, piece of paper." And he said to me a great line. He says, "Man, where you been brought up?" Which is a great line. So he says to me, "Well, it's in my locker." Oh, I said, "Oh, that's nice. Very nice." And I started to walk away. He says, "Well, don't you want to see it?" I said, "Okay, Phil, good. Let's go out and see your piece." So the whole time I'm Mr. Naive. We go into the hallway, open up his locker, lift up his locker. I see his sweatshirt hanging from the hook. I don't see nothing. I don't see the piece of cake. I don't see any piece of paper. I don't know what's going on. He says to me, "It's in my pocket." So I reach in the pocket over there, and I feel like same shape as a big squirt gun, but like a lot heavier. So I remember I said to him, I was like, "Phil, is this real? And he went like this, like,
You stupid.
duh. Like, no, I brought in a squirt gun. So, so I had to pause and think for a few seconds. It's, again, this is back in 77. So it wasn't like so crazy as it is today, but nonetheless, it's one of my students bringing in a gun to school. So I put my neck on the line, man. I said to him, I said, Phil, I just want you to know something. If I turn you into the office, you are going behind bars for minimum 15 years. That means when you get out, you're going to be 31. That means when you get out, your buddies in this room right now, they're going to have their own cars. Some will be married. Some will have kids. Some will have, really nice jobs, whatever. And you're going to be getting out. You're going to be probably trying to graduate. Like, so I know you didn't bring it in. This is what I'm saying in my head now. He didn't bring it in to intimidate me. It was like show and tell time. He wanted to show me something cool from this tough, culture that
felt connected
he was.
to you. He felt connected to you.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. He saw me as this wild guy.
Yeah.
So I said to him, look, I'm going to give you a note. You can leave school, put it in your pocket. I know you're not going to throw it out. Take it home. But I'm telling you, if you bring it in again, I'm going to turn you in. So don't bring it in again. If you bring it again, you're going to have to use it on me, and if you're not successful, I'm turning you in. So do not bring it in. As far as I know, he never did. But so now I'm walking up Flatbush Avenue, 15 years later. This guy grabs me, lifts me up in the air. And before I could say anything, he's like, "Oh, Mr. Laz, hey, how are you?" I was Mr. Laz, and I did my doctorate then. And puts me down. I'm looking at him like, "Who are you?" And he says to me, "It's me, Phil, from Martin Luther King School." And he says to me like this: "I want you to know I never thanked you for what you did for me. I was just, a punk. I was trying to be a thug, and I thought I was cool. And, I just want to thank you for saving my backside."
Wow.
And he had joined the, he was in the army. It was like a lifelong, been in the army for 15 years. That was like a career for him. And so Baruch Hashem, that happens quite a lot, especially now.
That's an amazing story. So that's what I'm asking. So you had the benefit of really, sometimes, God gives you those little crumbs here and there throughout life where you find out where you made a difference in someone's life. Had he, God forbid, ended up, especially, if he had gone, in, even if it wasn't for 15 years, even if he got a slap on the wrist, he would have never been the same. And who knows what would have happened to him, to you, and all of his potential descendants and good deeds. Amazing. Amazing. So let's go forward. I know I interrupted you, and you were in the middle of the process telling us, how you worked in that school, and
yeah,
my fault.
No worries at all. And so there were just so many like amazing lessons like that that have reinforced my own sense of who I am as an individual, and in terms of my own sense of as being a Jew and Yiddishkeit. And I remember when the riots did happen in Crown Heights, everything's divine providence. And so there were a lot of signs that went up in the community. I don't know if you remember this, but the Rebbe was talking a lot about the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. And from the Black community, these posters went up all over. What are the Jews hiding from us? What are the Jews keeping from us? Now, they may have had something entirely different, but I really interpreted that as they're right. We're not really like reaching out beyond our little borders here with the beauty of Torah, with the depth, the breadth of Torah. And, the Rambam Maimonides says we're supposed to, this light into the nations means we're really supposed to teach about these 7 Noahide laws. And, that is a way where everyone on the planet can lead a meaningful and fulfilling life. So I don't mean to sound preachy, but there's so many stories where, where people suddenly they feel, oh wow, we have a connection. I remember one time we were in the Brooklyn Science Museum, not the Jewish Children's one.
I know, the Brooklyn Science Museum. Yeah.
Right, the Brooklyn Science Museum, and there was an event we were doing with Project Cure. That's the racial harmony group that I helped start after the Crown Heights riots, and so we were doing, we did like a joint mural dedication on the 7 Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, actually. And so there was a few of us, Lubavitchers there, including one of our hip hop youth leaders, hip hop dancers, Yudi Simon. He was there, and I think maybe his parents were there even. But so most of the people there were Black, African American, or Caribbean American. And then I remember this lady comes over to the table, a Black woman, and she says to me, Dr. Laz, isn't it true? Don't you guys believe that when the Messiah comes, that it's not just for the Jewish people, it's for the whole world? And I was like, of course, you're 100%. She said, could you come over and tell my table that? And so I went over to the table. This is what they were discussing. In other words, there's a certain notion of that and it's a misconception, but to a certain degree, we've allowed that to go on. And that is this notion of that they feel that we have this attitude of being holier than thou, right? Whereas, see, I feel like that the amazing, again, that vision of the Rebbe was that he didn't see people like that. He said, yes, we have a special connection as Jews, of course. That's like your immediate family. But beyond that, the Rebbe's vision was a world vision that really taught me a lot of lessons, how to look at people and relate to people. And so here, can you imagine, one could have thought, oh, they're discussing Black power, they're discussing, the uniqueness of the African American community and to the exclusion of the Jewish community. Like, who knows what negative stereotypes we might have in our head. They're discussing how all the Jews should go back to Israel. I used to hear that every so often. And what were they talking about? They were talking about, what do Jews believe when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes? Is it for everybody or is it just for the Jews? And here's this Black lady saying, no, don't you believe that it's for everybody? And I was like, 100%, that Mashiach's going to help change the whole world. So,
wow.
So I feel like that, it's just been a real eye-opening experience, and to work with, maybe next time we'll have Richard Green on and Reverend Paul Chandler.
I want to take a few moments before I keep on cutting you off. I want you to talk a little bit about a few things. I made a few notes here, and I didn't prepare any notes. I wanted to just be a free-flowing conversation, like we're having a cup of coffee.
That's good. I like
together.
that.
And I love it. I feel like we could sit here for hours. If you notice, almost an hour passed since we started, and it doesn't feel like even 5 minutes. So I want to talk about Project Cure, but before I do that, I want to hear more about it. Before do that, I would like to ask you if you can, because you gave me, and actually I want to, zero in on this and really zoom in that it is and expand it. And I want to hear more about it, your idea. You gave me a beautiful title several weeks ago. We were, texting back and forth, and you said you had an idea. You had this, I get brainstorm idea for a topic for a class, for an ongoing class, or teachings, and the title was, is Torah racist? Now the truth is, and I'm not gonna mince any words, growing up in Brooklyn, especially sometimes with situations that happen, look, the reality of the area which I grew up in is that if you were mugged, you weren't mugged by a Chassid, and you weren't mugged by a white guy. There were no white non-Jews in the area. The only non-Jews and the only people maybe who would do that to you happened to be Black, African Americans. So I guess that kind of inevitably leads some people to have, I wouldn't call it racist ideas or racist thoughts, but some kind of like standoffish or an animosity type of like, hey, just stay away. And that's why I said, to me, you're a legend. You always were able to bridge that gap, and you always bring people together. And I know that inherently, even those people who behave that way or may sometimes espouse, things that may sound racist, they're not inherently racist, because the Torah, I know the Torah teaches us, to love every single human being, and how every single human being is created in the image of God. Every human being has a uniqueness, like you said, like the Rebbe taught us to learn. But still, at the same time, typically your Jewish community says, hey, let us just stay insular, stay out, leave us alone. And not that we mistreat anyone, because, I have a vivid memory of walking up Kingston Avenue and hearing a guy speak in Yiddish and say, in Yiddish, hey, what are you doing here, kid? Where you going? And I turn around and it's the big UPS guy that's been doing that route for 15 years. He speaks Yiddish, you know what I'm saying? And he was always treated well, always got a drink. And I have taken that to my home. Any UPS or mail, postal or Amazon delivery man or woman that comes, I offer them, you want a drink, you want something to eat? And they're like, no, we got no time. I'm like, here's something cold. So we have it inherently flowing in our blood, in our DNA, that is, to, embrace everyone. But at the same time, there could be some behaviors or some kind of typical, I want to say, Jewish community way of life that seems to espouse some kind of race. Could you talk about that a little bit? What you found, where the Torah comes from, and
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it, first it's a very deep discussion, and, that to a certain degree, some of these stereotypes have fallen into place based on experiences. And one being that the Jewish experience throughout history hasn't been such a great one, to put it mildly, like in terms of different countries that we've been in, and like with the Rebbeim of Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe have spoke many times about how that America is a Medina Shel Chesed. But it's a different, we're very fortunate.
Translate that. What does it mean? That you said the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe always spoke about
fosters and preaches kindness, as opposed to, you look at what's going on with Russia today, and they're not exactly preaching kindness. It's this old sense of militarism, and might makes right, and
right.
Showing off your military hardware and military parades, and it's like old school. You almost want to tell them, grow up already, And I don't blame them, right? Yeah, right. I don't blame the Russian people. It's these, these guys who are still in power, unfortunately, who have this agenda. So I think it's a very broad issue, but I want to focus in, make it a little more specific. When the riots occurred in Crown Heights, I guess I would wanted to mention, sort of parenthetically almost, people say, oh, you start to bring the youth together from the Black community, the Jewish community. Oh, that's beautiful. Some people said, like, you want to knock your head against the wall, go ahead. It's not going to do any good. Other people said, why are you kissing up to, the Black community? You don't have to do that. And so a lot of people, nobody was neutral. Everybody understandably had something to say, good, bad, positive, or okay, waste your time. You had some people, the bell-shaped curve in statistics sort of kind of goes up like this. So the majority of the people in the middle, like a good 65%, let's say 68%, they were like, all right, see what happens. Maybe not. Okay, it's your life, it's your time. And you had a certain small percentage over here that said, hey, you're out of your mind, you're crazy, nothing's good going to happen, and we don't need it. And then you had a small percentage over here that said, it's beautiful, great, go for it. Well, the Rebbe was in that small little percentage over here, the Rebbe was the one who told me, I was first volunteered Uncle Sam style by Rabbi Hecht. I had seen him maybe the second day of the riots. This was before cell phones. He was at the payphone on, I don't know if people even know what those things are. It's a little box on the street corner, and you lift up the phone, and then you put it in a quarter or whatever, 50 cents.
Don't worry. I remember when it was a dime, so I still remember something.
Right. So I saw Rabbi Hecht there, and I said, I pulled over, I was in my car, and I said, Rabbi, I've worked with the Black community, in Buffalo. and if there's anything I can do, give me a holler. So about a week goes by, and I was working at a yeshiva in Great Neck, and in New York City area, and in Queens, and when I went to my mailbox lunchtime, I had about 50 of those notes that, it said so and so called, please call back, so and so, please call back. And one, it was like the New York Times, the Daily Sun, the Amsterdam News, Representative so and so, Congressman so and so, Senator so and so, Mayor so and so, all these people. And then one was from Rabbi Hecht. I was like, okay, I'm going to call Rabbi Hecht first. And I said, okay, Rabbi, what the heck is going on? So he said, well, we had a meeting in my office with leaders from the Black community, and also from the media. A lot of media people were there, and they said, don't you have a person who could be the liaison between the from the Chassidic community to the Black community? And so he tells me, I literally pulled your book, Skullcap and Switchblades, off the shelf. I said, here's your man, here's his number, give him a call.
So he volunteered you.
He volunteered me. At which point I said, I ain't doing nothing until I write into the Rebbe. Wrote into the Rebbe. That day I got a response back that you should move on it. And again, bracha v'atzlacha, and that I should keep him informed. And so every one of our pu'ulas, every one of our activities that we did, whether it was a music concert, a basketball game, a dialogue for misunderstanding, or I should say dialogue for understanding, I wrote in, and we always got a bracha. And in fact, let me just see, do I have my wallet here? Yeah. Okay, because I want to show you. This is a picture I keep in my wallet with me. I have it on my a picture on my desktop and in my living room. And wow. Richard Green this is when we went to the Rebbe as co-directors of this racial harmony group, Project Cure.
Wow.
And that's brother Richard Green over here, who was the director of the Crown Heights Youth Collective, still is. And
still is.
Yep, still is to this day. And wow. We're like you said, we've gotten very close, and Paul and Yudi and TJ and this core of Project Cure in a way. So there was no agenda. We didn't know what we were going to do. I met Richard. I felt sort of like West Side Story. It was the Sharks and the Jets. What are we going to do? And the mayor's office had arranged that I would meet Richard at the Brooklyn Science Center. And it was like neutral territory, and we hit it off from the beginning. We spoke about our hippie days, different music groups that we saw, and I really felt like I was meeting like a long lost soul brother. And the only negative difference was he's a huge New York Jets fan, and I'm a diehard Buffalo Bills fan. I could see that was going to be our source of conflict.
Right.
I
wish that was the only source of conflict in my life, like in my marriage or anything. That would be fantastic.
That's so
That'd be too much to pray for, right? So you guys got along. You guys hit it off and got along very well.
I mean, right from the beginning, we were. I felt like we just our souls were like, very similar. And
you guys still talk?
Pardon me?
You guys still talk?
Oh yeah.
So you're friends.
Just a few days ago, and also with Reverend Chandler, with Yudi and TJ. Where Yudi who was our youth leader and hip hop dancer, freestyle dancer, and TJ is his African American partner, also youth leader, and also freestyle dancer. So they used to perform at when our music group would perform at our live shows. And Yudi, a couple of days ago, was hanging out with TJ. The two families were together on a camping trip, which wow. Is so cool. It's these great stereotype breakers that you reach out with a little bit of love and friendship, and the magic happens. And
I have a question. Just it's a curious question that comes to mind. Just as you're speaking. I know you said you kind of identified some pushback, or if not, at least some passiveness. You said I heard the 65, 68% passiveness, and then the smaller percent, but yet the pushback from the Orthodox Jewish community, from the Chabad community in living in Crown Heights, who, like you said, had suffered to a degree from that other community. So, there's some understanding as to why they may feel that way, not kind of being eager to go out. But did you get any pushback from the Black community?
I would say it wasn't so much myself, but some, yeah, I could tell. With my better half here. Yeah. Oh, okay. Do you need me for anything? Yeah, right now?
2 minutes. We'll finish in 2 minutes.
Okay, hold that thought. Excuse me one second.
We can't hear anything.
Oh, sorry.
So the question I asked was, did you get any pushback from the African American community?
I would say that really most people felt that it was a positive thing. We get very, there's the old thing, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, So there's, a lot of more of the loudmouths it wasn't so much from the Black community against me, but it was from some of the loudmouths within the Black community against Richard and Paul. Oh, you being an Uncle Tom,
Right.
the same thing that I would get. What, you being an Uncle Irving? You gotta you're kissing up to them, and so what I would tell them was that when we come together, we're not watering down our culture. It's not, you don't have to feel like you're being, that Yiddishkeit is being threatened, for character. It's being strengthened because you go sort of as a representative of, of the Chabad community, the Babish community in Crown Heights, especially. And so we learned a lot, that title, the reason why I said, is the Torah racist? Because at one of our dialogues, initially it was just maybe like every couple of weeks we start up with one dialogue, and it was so hot in the community that we were warned, if you're walking with groups of 4 and more, that you would be arrested for inciting another riot. So we had to tell all the young Chassidic men who were coming, walk in groups of 3 or less. And don't come alone, come with a partner or with 2 other people, but not with 3 other people, because we don't want anybody getting arrested. It was like hot. It was, the crimes, as you probably remember, it looked like a war zone. Yeah. Cops and helicopters, cops and and taped up vans, snipers on rooftops, like full riot gear, it was crazy. And so I think most people, as things started to pick up, more and more people started to join in from the sidelines. And then the thing just snowballed. Like I said, we had no agenda except to bring our youth together. And after the first meeting, when I'd say all those Jewish stereotypes and Black stereotypes came out, and it was sort of like people were butting heads, and we broke up. And I remember Reverend Chandler, who was at that meeting, the first meeting, he said, he says to me, Dr. Laz, we have to circle up now and say a prayer together. And I said to him, Reverend, with all due respect, if there's going to be a second meeting, we'll do it then. And this is what I love about Paul and Richard. They're just doers. They're just like, Ma'aseh Iker, action is the main thing. He says to me, no, Laz, I'm telling you, we got to do it now, right now. I'm like, okay, fine. I didn't think anybody was going to stay. We all circled up. Instead of it being all the Blacks on one side, all the Chassidic, young men on the other. Now, because we had already gotten up a little bit out of our places, now all of a sudden, oh wait, I got a black guy on one side, a black guy on the other, and I'm gonna hold his hand, like, okay, this is awkward, or this is hard, but that's what they did. That's what everybody did. And so I remember Paul said to me, I'm gonna say the 23rd Psalm in English. You know it in Hebrew? I was like, I know them all, brother. I was like, that's the only one I know by heart. Like, thank you. I was like, okay, I can deal with that. Sure, no problem. The 23rd Psalm it is. And so he says it in English, I say it in Hebrew. And this time all the guys are holding hands. And only a couple of the people left. They all stuck around to continue the talking. I really felt like that there was a lot of hope. I wasn't sure when we first started because there was a lot of antagonism, a lot. There was a lot of sort of snickering at each other, and you're all wealthy, you're all rich, you're all drug dealers, you're all, you got nothing productive to do with your lives. You control the media, you control the police. All these stereotypes went. So they were all like, and but it was good. They needed to get that out. One of the things I wanted to say was at the end of that meeting, because they would ask questions like, what's with the beanie on your head? What's with the white strings? What's with the beard? How come you all look dressed in black? Y'all look like the Undertakers, and one of the things that occurred to me was that we have lived side by side in the same geographic area, but there was so little.
The worlds apart. Worlds apart.
Worlds apart. Right. We could be same block.
That's what I told you. That's what I told you before. I said, I mean, we lived on the same street. I lived in an apartment building at the end of the street, and I live here, and we didn't know each other. Forget about knowing their names. I mean, some of the faces you recognize because they went to the same convenience store, but it's like we may as well have been living on two different continents.
I remember Richard had a great example. He said that we were like two ships passing in the night. You pick each other up on the radar, beep, 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 beep. Then you pass safely, and you're like, yeah.
Like that. Dr. Laz, what I'm going to do is I'm looking at the clock, and I see that we're on already for about an hour and 20 minutes. Could I ask you, because I really want to, I know, but I really want to talk about, I want to focus in a lot more. I want to hear more about this, the Project Cure, and all the other projects you had, and all the the lives you've touched and continue to touch. And I say continue to touch, not only that you're actively doing it now yourself, but I say, you mentioned before about the Talmidim, the students, those students you learn from, those students who inspired you inspired them, and they are continuing to inspire others. I have no doubt about that. So your work continues, and I'm happy to hear that you have the courage to have hope. It takes a lot of courage to have hope. It's not easy to have hope. Everybody says they have hope, but the guy who's falling down a cliff also has hope, but it's a false hope. It takes a lot of courage to try to do something about it, to grab on or to find a toy or something. You're the guy who did it, who does it. So if I may, can I ask you if we can continue this and next time focus in, be more, I should say more focused on, the Project Cure and what you feel about, racism and, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the problems that perhaps we have even in the Jewish community. But also, especially, I want to focus in the future about, this thing that we said that everybody's created in the image of God. And I know some people are going to ask, is God white? Is God black? I think he's neither white nor black. Is he, is he male? Is he female? That's not the point. The image of God means that human spirit, at least I can tell you what it means to me, that human spirit, that the human intellect and emotion that can overcome any difference, that can overcome any challenge, that can overcome any problems that we may have amongst each other. I mean, look, the fact is that, unless they change it, which I hope they don't, I know they won't either. But the fact is that God, in his infinite wisdom, made it so that two opposites have to come together in order to produce another human being. Okay, you're married, I'm married. We know it's as much as we love our spouses, and you said it before, and I was happy to hear it, my better half. But still, it's taking a man, a woman, Mars, Venus, trying to bring them together, not trying, but bring them together. And you got to figure out how to bring that together. And then you can have another, a child, a future, another generation. So I say this, I apply it here too. You know, we're so different. There's so much out there that we by by taking the human being and having that spirit and coming together, whether you're white, black, man, woman, different religions, whatever it may be, this is the beauty of producing that, next generation of peace, of harmony. So I want to, do I have your permission? Is that okay? We'll continue this. We'll do this at another occasion.
I just wanted to mention that that's what says the word Shemayim is made up of two Hebrew words, Eish and Mayim, which are
What is
fire and
Shemayim?
water.
Just for the listener, what is Shemayim?
Shemayim means the heavens, right? And it's made up of two Hebrew words, Eish and Mayim, fire and water. Well, what could be more opposite than that, right? But when you bring both together and they work to support each other, work in harmony, then you have this true idea of what shalom is, of what peace is. And so, and maybe to conclude with this note that, at least for tonight, that what we found, even after that first meeting, that first crazy meeting where most people stuck around, I would say probably 90% of the 100 people who were there stuck around because they wanted to continue the conversation. So I felt like there was hope, because there was sort of this animosity, but it was based on ignorance. They don't know why we have a beanie on their head. Isn't that like, Judaism 101, right? But that's true, they don't. And we don't know what the dreadlocks mean. We don't know what the Ankh symbol means, what they wear. And so we just knew very little about each other. And so I felt it was that these are stereotypes that are based mostly on ignorance, which means that's easy to overcome, much easier to overcome than if you have a history of groups that have just hated each other, they fight against each other, they're killing each other, the Hatfields versus the McCoys, then you got some real problems. But
just ignorance.
Yeah, and so that was an easy thing to overcome. But what I wanted to say was that we found in a very practical way, and again, this is going to sound like a cliche, but we really found it to be the case that we had so much more that unites us than divides us. Like beyond, there's a few things, okay, a couple of, you got one handful what are issues of contention perhaps, but there's like 95 other things where where there's a sort of commonality, and so I think that's what we what we can focus on and what we should focus on, and music again was a huge force. We'll save more of that for next week. But
I want to conclude with this. I want to conclude with this thought, as you're saying about making peace. In Jewish tradition, I mean, obviously, I'm just saying to the listener, we pray 3 times a day, and we have the I would say the climax of the prayer service is the Amidah, when we stand upright in a very, very, very what would I call it, straight up position, and we pray in an undertone. That's the most intimate moment with God. When we conclude, we take 3 steps back, and then we say a verse. We say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav. He who makes peace on high should bring peace on us and all of Israel, and for that matter, all of the world. So a wise friend of mine once told me, he said, when you want to do Oseh Shalom, when you want to quote, make peace, first thing you got to do is take 3 steps back. You can't stay in your position, in the spot where you're standing, whether it's coming from ignorance or, you're determined that I'm right and whatever it is. Anytime you want to make peace, you got to take a few steps back and allow room. And that person takes a few steps back. You take a few steps back. Now you can bridge together. And I appreciate it. That's really what you've done and you continue to do. So, Doctor, I'm going to ask you if we can continue this. We'll text back and forth. Sure. Hopefully the listener will, I'm sure the listener will enjoy it. Hopefully there'll be a lot of listeners and viewers. And if there's any questions, anybody, please feel free.
I'll leave you with food for thought.
Go ahead.
Okay. Because
Sure.
at one of our dialogues, one of the Black teenagers said to us, "Your Torah is racist." And we're like, "What are you talking about? Torah is colorblind. God is colorblind. He don't care. The least he's got to worry about is what color your skin is," right? So he said, "No, your Torah is racist." What are you talking about? He said, What do you mean? It's right. It's right in your Bible, right in the quote unquote Old Testament. What do you mean? And he said, because you cursed Ham, right? And so we were all like, man, that's not it. But I have to tell you what happened. As a result of that, we all went back and started hitting the books. We were like, what does that mean? Like, what's going on here? And so we'll save that for the next time.
Wow, now you have me intrigued. I mean, I know the story, but I want to hear how you. I don't
Right.
want
No,
to
it's brilliant.
how you explain that. So that's good. We're gonna put this on a poster. Thank you so much, Dr. Lazarson. Keep up the good work. And
Too, Rabbi.
nah, I'm just the guy who talks, who yaps. You're the guy who's doing the work.
For discussing these issues and bringing these, there's such important issues, and a lot of people just don't deal with it. So
Right.
call it to you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Thank you. Okay, so both of us will keep up the good work.
And I must end with this one thing.
Sure.
All right. So the reason why it's called Project Cure. See, we asked about the music. I was the first rapper in the Jewish music scene. It was so unusual. Some of the Chabadas I would go to, they would say, don't do no rapping there, no rapping there. We've come a long ways, okay?
Yeah. Now they only want the rap and the reggae.
That's right.
Right?
All right, you singing traditional melodies? Nah, I don't think so. So we did this thing where Cure is C-U-R-E, and I learned to rap from the best, my students. Because, oh man, top notch, inner city kids, man, they're mind-boggling good. They can out-rap Vanilla Ice any day of the week. So Cure is see communication across the nation. Let's all sit down and have a conversation. You understanding, I listen to you, you listen to me. We can work things out in harmony. Respect each other's feelings, respect who you are, respect each other's cultures, and we'll all go far. E for education, a point of elevation. It keeps on going even after graduation. So that's the C.
You wrote that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a whole bunch of
next time maybe we get a couple of guys to do some beatboxing, and we'll get this really going well.
Sounds good.
that was once my dream. That's in my bucket list.
All right, good. We got to do it.
No. Maybe. You never know. I'll tell you the story next time. Remind me the story of the cassette that we found in a rented car and how everybody was singing reggae for a while in 770.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
What?
I'm intrigued. I would like to hear it.
Next time. Okay, we'll keep it. Take care. Good night.
Okay, Rabbi, you too. Good night to everybody else. Peace. Increase the peace, y'all.
Thank you.